Good evening and welcome once again. I would like to open the space by acknowledging that we are honored to be meeting on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We thank you for your stewardship since time immemorial. As people of Black African descent, we thank you for welcoming us into the circle, creating space for those of us who escaped slavery from the South or migrated by choice to settle on this land. We thank you for your diverse knowledge that you continue to share with us. As we get ready for an important conversation this evening, I'm reminded of the wisdom you shared that there can be no reconciliation with ourselves and with others until we are able to speak and be present to the truth of who we are and the experiences that have shaped us. Good evening. I am Jacqueline Lawrence. I'm a diversity and equity strategist, poet, and community host of Black on Black, heard on CHUO 89.1 FM on Saturdays, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this evening. A special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those who have participated in past webinars. I thank you to the funders who are also present here, who have supported this very important initiative. Today, we will introduce the Maama Watali Support Circles. Participants will hear what it is about and why it is important for Black and other racialized women to be part of such healing circles. I would like to welcome Susan Namulindwa, the director of Maama Watali, to share about Maama Watali Circles. After Susan tonight, then we will join by two panelists who will share their views on what triggers abusive relationships. And then we will open the space for you to share your questions or your comments so that we can interact with each other. So Susan, I'll turn it over to you, please.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am honored to speak to you this evening about Maama Support Circles. Maama Support Circles were created in response to the crises, to the crises that were happening in our own lives at the time in 2018. Some of us were going through severe trauma in our own homes. Some of us were new in our country, and we were lost with trying just to navigate the system. And some of us were just, undergoing stress and crisis because of being out of work. And so some of us who had survived then started talking to our sisters and supporting each other, not in a professional way, but in just a matter of a shoulder to lean on. Sometimes you don't need somebody to tell you what to do. You just want somebody to listen to you. In 2022, May, we received funding through the Ontario Trillium Foundation support test grant. And that is where the original idea of supporting each other became then possible for us to formalize it. And as such, the Maama Support Circles was born. The intent then of the circles is to help Black and newcomer women rebuild self-esteem, confidence as part of healing process after traumatic experiences. It's also to educate and build awareness about the supports available to help them navigate and to really know where to look to get this support. It is also to reestablish personal and professional relationships to overcome barriers and to build resiliences in our own selves. When we were starting the circles, it was like finding a space where you can speak about what you're going through with others is like finding a blanket, a shield to help you through. With this funding, we are now working to establish 3 to 5 circles in a form where Black women can drop in. It is a safe space to talk to others that have gone through similar experiences, and you share culture and lived experiences. The idea is to really strengthen each other and to provide information to support each other. We are training 3 to 5 people to be group facilitators or mentors. Their role is really to, first and foremost, we are going to put these mentors through rigorous training, really to learn about listening without interrupting, and listening with the intent not to provide a response, but to understand. These mentors then will go out on outreach in the community, and we intend to create youth, senior, and caregiver circles. We intend to do this through all parts of Ottawa, the east, the west, the south, and the central areas in Orleans, Hunt Club, Albion, the West End, including Michelle Heights. As part of the project team, accountability and good governance, the project has gotten a community, we are setting up a community advisory committee. These are folks with a role in just to give back advice, to see how the project is going, to evaluate the impact that the project is having in our community. We want the women that we serve to feel safe, but also to be able to change their circumstances. The Ontario Trillium Foundation grant is for 3 years, and we are hoping that in these 3 years, the community, the women, the newcomer women, the Black racialized women will learn to recognize the patterns of violence and examine cultural norms, understand what their rights are, and be able to get their families into a safe space. We have been lucky to be able to build on the work we had started with Maama Watali. And in this space, we also received additional funding from the Canadian Women Foundation to help strengthen and build on the series that we had done previously under the Strong Women, Strong Men series. So we are hoping that the message is going to go out to the community about the supports that are in the system. We are going to be calling for more volunteers to be trained as mentors. And we want to create safe spaces for women to share their experiences and get support. So as the project unfolds, we will keep the community updated on the milestones, on the challenges, on the opportunities. And we will work together towards educating the Black community in Ottawa and beyond that love should not hurt. Not for any one of us. The key message here is love should not hurt. And there will be somebody willing to lend you a hand, lend you a shoulder to lean on as we build a resilient community. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the vision of the project.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that. And you just spoke so beautifully about so many different elements around creating this Maama Watali support circle. And it is really dynamic and wonderful that you're at the next level in terms of your work. Now, we talk about the Maama Watali support circle. I just invite us for a moment to think about what's the meaning of circles in our lives. I mean, circles have different meanings in different cultures and traditions. Um, it's not just something that we get present to in architectural features or gardening or graphics and those kinds of things, but it has some historical deep roots within both Indigenous and African um, people's way of life in terms of the cycle of life and the circle of life. It represents birth and rebirth. It represents the notion there's no hierarchy among us. It represents the notion that we're working shoulder to shoulder. It is this interconnectedness that is so powerful and present in both Indigenous and African cultures. And it is really also representing the cycle of nature itself and how that informs us, how we're connected to that. And it's the circle of knowledge and power that we each are striving for in our lives in different ways. And there's an ancient African astronomers where it's their philosophical essence of African tradition says that the circle represents what it is, what it does, and how it appears. And so this really gives us a great launching pad to step into our conversation space this evening as we begin to explore that fundamental question, the critical question, and one of it that Susan points so beautifully to in terms of why the need for this, not only conversation, but the need to have the Maama Watali support circles for women. So this is really an invitation to a space of healing. I'm about to introduce, before I introduce our panelists for this evening, I really want to share how you as the audience can also continue to engage with us. To please put your comments in the in the in the um, in the tab to place your questions. And if we do not get them all answered tonight, the members of Maama Watali support circles will respond to your questions and respond to you by email. You will be able to pose your questions directly, and then also your questions will also support us in designing future consultations as well as the learning that Susan just informed us about. So I now have the pleasure of introducing our two panelists for this evening. Maama Watali, an RN and a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, is originally from Kenya. And Mary Wariara emigrated to Canada in her late teens. On entering the healthcare system, she worked for 2 years as a personal support worker. After graduating in 2011 from York University, Toronto, with a Bachelor of Science, honors in nursing, Ms. Wariara attended the Ontario Nurses College, where she graduated that same year as a registered nurse. She has since held various roles in the nursing profession, not only as a bedside nurse, but as a nurse leader, holding various executive and administrative roles, which included responsibility for team building and empowering her team to expand their abilities in order to deliver the best possible patient care. She now works as an executive director in long-term care. Welcome, Mary. Our second panelist is Annick Constant. Annick graduated with a Bachelor of Social Work from Laurentian University, as well as a Master's in Social Work from McGill University in Montreal. She began her career working for the Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services in Cornwall. Later, she would join the Ottawa Children's Aid Society for 12 years in several different capacities, such as parenting assessment and education, child protection, foster care, and adoption. Annick then spent 22 years working at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, providing counseling to children, youth, and their parents, caregivers, around their children's medical diagnosis and management. Her clinical experience uses an integrative approach, crisis intervention, short-term solution-focused, family system, grief and trauma-informed therapy, just to name a few. In her private practice for an employee family assistant program, she provides critical incident trauma counseling in the workplace. Annick is fluent in French and English, and she is mother to 4 adults and grandmother of 7 children. Welcome, Annick. I'm so glad that we're engaged in conversation this evening. Thank you so much. You know, I want to, just as a springboard for this conversation around triggers and abusive relationships, Susan outlined several factors that could contribute to some of these things, such as, you know, stress. We're still in COVID in many ways, and we know that has put some additional stress on families and individuals. The migration pattern and process is also something that can add stress. Whether you're studying in school, whether in a new location, new environment. And I just wondered if we can start the conversation by just sharing what are some of the triggers you may have seen personally or professionally that could lead to abusive behavior.
The abuser usually feels that he's most important and his priority. And I'm saying his because statistics shows that very often it is a male activity to abuse in the family circle or even in the workplace. But we do have female who abuse as well. Poor self-esteem is one. Very often, the person might have experienced abuse growing up. We often forget that abusive relationship is a very cultural, accepted behavior in some cultures, that the male is the dominant figure. What he says goes. We also have poverty, lack of income could be a stressor and trigger abusive behavior in the home and in the community. Access to weapon. Our media could also be a trigger or a contributor to abusive behavior. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let other people have a chance to add, because I could go on.
Well, Annick, we're going to come back to some of those examples that you cited, you know, because when we're talking about cultures, we're really talking about kind of a systemic container that's there. And so I just want to come back to that in a minute. But Mary, I just want to know if you wanted to add anything to what are some of those triggers that may cause abusive relationships.
I would say that the pandemic did create a lot of kerfuffles in many families. As we are all aware, Canadian life is very fast-paced. There's so many activities that are happening. And what happened during COVID, all the social gathering was shut down. People who are working, they were out of the house all day. Now they're spending more time together. They got to know each other, and they got to know how much maybe they didn't like each other very much, because now they have they are seeing themselves too much. So that really created a lot of stress in the families, and we have seen a lot of breakages in marriage during COVID. Some people also work in healthcare, which was a very stressful area, requiring them to work long hours, and that did put a lot of pressure in the families, because maybe they used to be there most of the time, but now they are required at work many times. I know Annick did touch about culture. I think traditions based on which community you come from or which country you come from, that also does contribute to the topic we are talking about. And the last thing I think is desire for power. I think there's sometimes there's a lot of power power struggle between either the spouses, the children, or the different relationships that we have. And the power struggle really do put a dent in the relationship. And this can be one of the triggers that can spiral into abuse.
Well, I think we've hit so many big ones. I just want to go back and circle back to Annick. Annick, can you represent and just picked up where Mary just left off in terms of what is this cultural container that provides that systemic confirmation for abuse to be present. And, you know, I don't think any culture is void of this in any way, shape, or form, particularly cultures that are steeped in patriarchy and those kinds of things. But what were you thinking about when you presence that in the space? Can you provide some specific examples around what are some of those cultural reference points for us to pay attention to as triggers?
You know, money speaks volume. When the wife is isolated, isolation is another trigger, by the way. We often forget this. And we know during the pandemic, a lot of countries had, like, for example, France, one of the ways they went around if abuse was happening in the home was for the female to say, I have to go to the pharmacy, or I have to go someplace, and then actually leave the home and get help. That was a cue. A lot of other countries had to put things in place to, you know, sort of get to know what's happening in the home, because there was isolation. People stayed home. 2020, we stayed home. 2021, we started going out. But from March 2020 on, we were really isolated. And we know that abuse to female went up very much so. So it's shown to that. To come back to the cultural thing, when a wife is isolated, not working, depend totally on the husband, we see that is also the cultural. There's a lot of cultures where women just don't work, and lack of education. Where will she think of herself to be employed? Because her role, she was socially brought up to think that marriage, my husband, my family is number one. And I can name many cultures, but
they're all in, it's in every culture.
And even in my culture, I saw my mother, my generation, and my children's generation very much different. That's because, again, women have choices. They are educated, they are self-employed, they are employed, they are self-sufficient, raising children. They no longer need the spouse to provide for them. And we have some culture, there are no Ontario Works, there are no government help. So they depend on the men totally for their survival. So
thank you so much for that, because now you've brought up also not only the isolation, but the dependency in terms of financial dependency. Mary, if I can go to you a little bit, sorry?
Lack of education.
Lack of education as well. Yeah. Mary, I want to go back to you because you also brought up, you introduced the word power in the conversation. Can you say a little bit about what that looks like, what that feels like in terms of that power dynamics and how that plays out in terms of being a trigger for abusive relationships?
So when we talk about power, is that dominance, whether it's the female dominance or the male dominance, and there's a struggle between the two, who's saying what. Going back to connecting it with culture, there's some culture where the male figure is the one who makes all decisions and everybody is supposed to say yes to what is happening. And given my real life experiences, when you have the woman or the other person saying, well, you have said this, let's think about it. Let's think about what is this going to do to our family in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. And the person is not coming up with a good plan, and you say, maybe I don't think this is the right way to go, then you have the power struggle, because when the person says this is what is happening, you're supposed to say yes, but don't question. So as we are having more and more people get enlightened, it becomes difficult for the woman, because she may be well educated, have more exposure, know a lot, and based on the who is holding the power, it creates that struggle between the two people.
I also think in some cultures, it's inherent that the male has the right to control. So
Correct.
it's his giving birthright to control.
Right.
And that is passed on to generation and generation, and power breeds abuse, right? So when you have the inherent mentality, philosophy, or cultural disposition that, yes, I am male, therefore I'm dominant, it's definitely.
And then when you add the factors that you've said before in terms of stress, that exacerbates the situation, or
Yes.
isolation or lack of education, it exacerbates it in a way. I want to come back to something that Mary just presenced in the space as well. Is this, what does this construct of enlightenment look like? What are some of the ways that folks are getting enlightened, particularly women are getting enlightened about that they have choice, that they also have some agency, that they also have some power? And are those also triggers for abuse as well?
Yeah, I do agree with your point. So some of the ways that people do get exposed, right now, when COVID hit, everybody was isolated. So you're trying to get to learn, you're learning more about yourself. You're on the internet, you're joining groups, because now people are joining groups virtually. So we found that people were getting more resources that way. We know companies stepped up and they provided EAP programs, and these programs do have a lot of resources. So we were seeing people were getting more enlightenment that way. They were getting enlightened. They got to know what their rights are. And the fact that being an immigrant coming from another country, coming to Canada, there are a lot of resources here. As we were talking about the males being the dominant people in some culture, once you come here, you are told you can be able to do this. You can go to school. You can be able to join this women's organization, like the way we have this circle right now, which is a safe space where people can talk. But depending on where you came from, that could not have been a possibility. So now you're getting exposure. You're coming to a country where people are exposed to many things. So that's where people are getting exposures. And now it becomes conflict in the family, because now I think as a woman, I can be able to go to school. As a woman, I can get a high paying job. As a woman, I can be able to do A, B, C, and D, but yet the male figure wants to take that dominance of telling you what you can do, what you cannot do. So if I would say I want to go to school and I'm told I cannot go to school, then you can see the conflict start to develop there. The tension starts slowly, and then it builds up, and then it blows up.
Yeah.
I want to just talk about that temperature, that buildup of it. How conscious are folks when they're in that state to recognize the buildup? Annick, you were talking about the cues that were given in France to know that folks were in some kind of trouble, and the safe word that was used to get them out of the situation. How do folks really plug in to know that, oh, this has gotten into another state now, this has gotten into another level, that I'm not safe, that there may be some danger to my life? How do they, when does that click in, that they're now in a situation that could actually could cost them their lives?
It takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
Studies and research shows that a woman leaves her partner about 3 times before she eventually leaves. And there's always the threat and the fear and the hope. And very often we say, oh, she went back to him and all that. There's always the hope. And I think we cannot minimize the fact that not only she's hopeful, she may not have any resources to go to, and not everybody wants to live in a shelter with a child or two or three. And I think we minimize the attachment. Sometimes it's not even love anymore. Sometimes it's the attachment that or history that the person has with the other person. And they want to give it a chance. They want to, for the family, for the union. And we were all raised that the nuclear family was the best family. We are now starting to realize that it isn't. There are all kinds of families. And maybe some women don't want to struggle. Maybe some women are ashamed that they have to be separated. So it takes a while for women to actually make the step, even when they have agency, even when they are educated, even when they know they have way out to go. And there's the guy who begs, I'm going to change. And so we do minimize the hope and the fact that there's attachment, there's history between these two people. So it's not just easy to say, I don't love him anymore, I can go. We know that a lot of people stay in relationship, there's no longer love, but there's attachment and there's history.
That is such a powerful point that you're bringing up. And particularly because, sometimes the attachment is around the kids. Sometimes the attachment is around, all of the things that you guys mentioned before. In terms of the reliance or the connection to finances, etc. You were going to say something, sorry?
And I was just going to add that we think that every relationship started as the guy is an abuser. That's another mistake. Sometimes there's been 10, 20 years of not abuse, or she developed the tolerance no longer to tolerate the abuse. There's that trajectory. What was at the beginning of the relationship was more abusive, and then she herself has become more self-aware that this is abuse. This I could do. And we forget there's the financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's sexual abuse, there's physical abuse. We often minimize. Some partners are very much financially abusing the other person.
I thank you for that, because I think so often when people think of abuse, they think of first physical abuse. But you've just listed the financial abuse, you've listed the emotional abuse. And sometimes folks believe that because he hasn't hit me, I haven't been abused. I just want to tie this back to what you said earlier in terms of sometimes it takes several efforts before someone leaves that abusive space. And I want to bring Mary into the conversation in terms of, is there something you want to add around the attachment and the trajectory of the violence, of the abuse, and how women in particular would then be able to seek some help or support or to make that decision to leave?
There's something called the circle of abuse. And with the circle of abuse, you start with the tension. So the tension builds up, somebody explodes, then you have that incident happening. Then it goes to the reconciliation where somebody is being remorseful of what has happened. And then it goes to the calm section where now the relationship is kind of okay, things are going okay, before it loops back. And I think as women, because we have that humble heart, that is always caring. You're worried about your children. You're worried what people are going to say about me. You're worried about your reputation. So what tends to happen is when this abusive situation happens, you are hoping it's a one-off. The person is remorseful and things gets better, but then it continues to carry on to a point whereby you yourself may not realize it, but the people around you will point things at you and say, hey, did you just realize this just happened to you? And sometimes it will take somebody else to point to you that something is going on than you yourself in the situation, because you kind of, I want to say, like, you tolerate, you have that tolerance. It keeps happening so often. So it's like you are already in that mode. this will happen, he will calm down and things will get better again. So it's like a vicious circle until somebody somewhere notices this and says something to you. Then you say, okay, yeah, wait a minute. Now I have seen this is a pattern. Then you can start to see those triggers. You would know, okay, when this is happening, this is what is actually going to happen to me. I can give an example, like for myself.
Yes, please, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I can give an example. Like for years and years, I thought everything was going okay. I knew something was not right, but I had that hope. I had children, I had status in the community. I am trying to keep that family because I am raised to know that once you're married, it's until death do you apart. So you're doing everything possible you can do to keep this family together. You are worried about what your kids are gonna go through if you're separated or if you get divorced. So that keeps you going. You are attached. You are attached to the social circle that you already have. Once you separate, you know everything has to be separated. You may not have the same circle of friends again. You may have to depart from the areas or the environment you have known for years. So those are kind of the things that held me back until somebody said, hey, Mary, are you still sleeping? You need to wake up and smell the roses. Something is going down really bad. And one of the things is I started saying, yeah, I can see it. Like I started saying being isolated because all the friends I had, something would be said. And at the end of the day, I am feeling like I am not even comfortable going to gatherings because I don't know what people are saying. I don't know what is happening. And to a point where I was isolating myself, I only had like one group where I said, no matter what happened, I'm going to stick to this one group. And that was the group that was helping me spiritually. It was my fellowship group. That's where I kept going. And even that, I received a lot of verbal abuse. Just the fact that I want to go to church, just the fact that on a Tuesday evening, I want to spend some time with ladies. We read the Bible and share experiences together. And this continued for some time until one point I said, I think I have had enough. I need to put a stop to this. I cannot take it more, because I started developing a physical manifestation of the stress levels I was going through. I could hear my phone ring and my heartbeat would skip because of how much stressed I was. You know, I could come home and just stay in the driveway. I always used to joke with my sister when she's on the phone. I'm like, I'm in the driveway, but I don't know if I want to go in or I want to just stay here. And hopefully something changes. Yeah.
Right, right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I so appreciate you presencing your own experience there. And, you've just brought in this whole notion of the judgment and the over judgment that also bears on women in particular. And particularly because there's still, even in 2022, there's still that thought that women are responsible for their families. And so, that thought about being judged by not only other family members, but community members. But I think the other piece that you brought up that's so powerful is your own self-judgment as well. That I heard in that space that could also lead to self-isolation. So that can also exacerbate that situation. So thank you so much for sharing that. And, Annick, what Mary just shared was such a powerful demonstration of what you shared about that level of, kind of that level of that hope that lingers, that attachment that lingers. And her own journey in terms of how she moved into a space of waking up, so to speak. One of the things that Susan shared so powerfully was the Maama Watali Support Circles being this space of support, being this space of for women to gather and to learn and to listen and to be able to know they're not alone. Can you say a little bit about the types of services that you've seen that women have access to, and what happens to them during this process when they are in that healing space that gives them the support, authentic support, non-judgmental support? Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure. First, though, I want to come back to the fact that, some of us are strong. Some of us come to this planet strong. We are not all equal. That's my philosophy. I'm going to stick to it. Some of us are able to go through things and come out so strong.
Mhm.
And I think that's what speaks about agencies. And you have another group of people that they need that push. They need the resources. They need the Maama Circle. They need the Women Immigration Center. And you have women who have been able to be paralyzed, to do nothing.
Mhm.
So you have different types of group. I've come across women that have come through so much adversity, and they give me power.
Mhm.
I am the worker, I'm the counselor, I'm the therapist, and they are giving me that power because of their life journey and how they were able to get out of it.
Mhm.
Is it a birthright? Is it a combination of the environment? We've seen people who have done things like escape and run and get to, one of them is that young woman who became a well-known model, how she ran through the desert and got out and got to France and was discovered because she also had something that worked for her. She had beauty and she was able to use it to her advantage, right? So we do have different types of personality, different types of people that even with all the resources, even all the encouragement and motivation, they are so paralyzed by the experience that they've lived. There are great, great resources in Ottawa, in major cities that women can go to school. I speak of one particular woman, and I have to be careful not to give too many identified information. She came with no high school, two kids with a chronic disease being treated every month, every 3 months in my clinic at CHUO. She did her high school. She graduated high school. She entered nursing 4 years. She graduated with a 4-year nursing degree before her children were able to transition to adult service. I lived through this journey with this woman. I never thought she was going to finish high school, let alone do a 4-year degree in nursing and pass the licensing. She's working at the Civic Hospital. When we see each other, it's like magic that she went through that. And she did okay by the kids managing that illness. It's a daily, it's diabetes, every 2 hours that you have to be managing. When they become teenagers, it's almost impossible. She did it. She did it alone. She didn't have a spouse.
One of the things you're talking about, I mean, some people would call that resilience. I call that resourcefulness, because that's a digging into a reservoir that I'm not even sure you discover or know that you have.
And I think she discovered it as she was doing it. I don't
the
think
doing led to the discovery.
Yes. And in French, we have a word that is resourceful, but is débrouillard. When somebody is very much motivated to achieve something, they can do a lot. And there's a lot more where that come from.
But you guys are just dropping these nuggets here. I'm just so thankful for that, because what you're talking about too is that sense of not just the external motivation, but the intrinsic motivation that takes you to a deeper level and connecting with that. And I want to bring Mary back into this. And if you don't mind just sharing a little bit more as to what your own, what did you learn about yourself as you went through this process? What was your transformation like? And what was it that got you so centered to be where you are now? Or what is the journey you traveled to be where you are now?
That's a great question. As Annick has said, I think we all have different strengths, and we are born, and I guess the environment that we are raised molds us to who we are. Because for me, there was a time I was lost. And then through encouragement from friends and family, I got to where I am today. I had to find myself somewhere, and I found myself through my faith. That's the key thing that has helped me to be where I am. If I did not know God, I would not be here today. With everything that has transpired in my life, all the events that have happened in my life, I always joke and say, if this was to happen to the people who are doing it to me, I'm sure the story will be different. They'll be in either a mental hospital or somewhere else. But I had that one thing, having faith in God. That is the one thing that motivated me. I knew I could do it. I just needed that push. So what I did is I got counseling because I did identify, yes, I have faith, but I need somebody to give me resources to be able to build myself. And I know there's always a stigma for you to be able, for somebody to seek help. But for me, I was at that point where I needed all the help I could. So I did go for therapy for some months. I diligently went there looking to save myself. And the other thing is my children. I had to be strong for my children, because if I broke down, who would be there for my kids? So that was another thing that was encouraging me, that I have to be strong to be there for my kids and to be there for my family. I had a lot of support that surrounded me. I had good friends, good family, and I know that is not always possible for some people, because when you're going through this, the person that is abusing you always disconnects you from everybody. Every single individual, anyone they know you're getting close with, they are going to make that situation to be difficult, and you will not keep any relationship. So you are isolated. You cannot talk to anybody because you don't trust anybody, and you have nowhere to go. So they continue abusing you. And because when they go out in the community, they are well liked, they are known by everybody. Everybody think this is the best man you can ever have, or this is the best lady you can ever have. People will never suspect anything. So you wonder now, who do I even talk to? Because they have this idea of what this family is, because people used to think I had a good marriage and they would admire the couple, but not knowing what was underlying and happening in the family.
Oh, thank you so much for that, because that mask that we wear sometimes is so powerful. But tied to that also builds up the stigma for this. So can you, Annick, I'm just going to ask you, can you speak a little bit about the stigma that's attached to not only being in an abusive relationship, but also working yourself out of that? And what is some of those stigma that some women face coming out of that experience?
I think it's twofold. I think we have the societal stigma, but we have also stigma that we put on ourselves. Okay. Again, like Mary mentioned, you know, I was married for better or for worse until death do us apart. You know, it's in our mind, right? And so we have that, oh, he's gonna change. This is temporary. And we have the society, the family. What are they gonna think? Can I do it alone? Can I really do it alone? Because you may have the support of friends, but once you're out of the marriage and you're on your own, other friends gonna be around. So there's that fear too. We forgot that there's that fear to start over. Am I ever gonna find? I have women telling me, I have 2-3 kids. Which man who's ever gonna find me? Who's gonna want me with 2-3 kids? So there's also the fear of being alone. Women are afraid to be alone. One of Maya Angelou says, even if you hate being alone, one of her in her book, you learn to be alone. Many women are afraid to not have that man, to not have that financial support, even though he's doing less than you sometimes, but it's an additional revenue. And I think
I want to come back to Mary too.
I just want to add the mental health issue, the mental health piece. And during that period, she mentioned she had mental health problem. Some women get out of it, and some women takes longer. It lingers and lingers. So we forgot that piece that is so crucial to get out of depression and start choosing to be happy.
Well, I thank you for that, because I was about to lead into something that Mary said and what you've just said now in terms of the stigma, not only the stigma about the situation of being in an abusive relationship, but the stigma of seeking counseling, the stigma of seeking those kinds of help. So Mary, can you share a little bit about how did you break down that barrier for yourself to then be able to say, you know what, I do need help? And, similar to what Maama Watali Support Circles are listening for, is how to support women to really seek this kind of space to support their healing. So how did you break through that stigma around counseling?
For me, being in my profession, I have provided a lot of counseling to other people. So for me, when the time came, I knew I needed help because I was crashing and it was affecting my health. Personally, as I mentioned, like my heart would skip a bit, and I thought, you know what, I'm too young to leave this world. I have so much to do, and that's what made me seek therapy. But when you think about other people, they may not even know where to get the resources. For me, I am the one who gives those resources, so I was able to identify somewhere to go.
Well, thank you so much for that. And so what are some of the opportunities that, and let me just say to the audience, please do send your questions so that we can continue to engage with our panelists for a few more minutes. And then we can then be able to just see what some of these healing opportunities are. So as we step into this healing space, Annick, how do you see the Maama Watali Support Circle being that space of healing for women who, and their children and their families to really be able to move through this kind of a triggering space that affects them so many different levels, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of those things?
Yeah, I'm a person who doesn't think that there's only one way to heal. I believe in finding that healing at different places. I'm not a very religious person, but the people who are, I admire them. And I've said, good for you. That's one source. It could be a community group. It could be a woman reading group. Healing is everywhere. It's everywhere. It could be having a good, long friend that you can call and say, you give one piece to that person. I don't think you can find healing in only one source. Mm-hmm. You have to know that because we are so complex as human, we are all very complex. We are made of very, very different moving parts, that finding your healing, please don't put it in one place. Use it. Mm-hmm. And that circle could be good for you for this year. And next year, you move on to something else. You move on to professional therapy, or to your clergyman, or to finding love again. And I'm not just talking about romantic love. It could be finding love of nature, or finding yourself a hobby that you never had a chance to do before. So healing could be in different sources. And if, for example, you do find healing in one place, good for you. But don't put all your healing in one resource.
I love that. Thank you for presencing that, because that's such a critical point. And not only that, you've also mentioned that as you move through the process, you require a different type of healing.
Absolutely.
And so there is kind of the evolution of yourself through this process as well. Yes. And so the resources that you will require, like the moment if you're trying to flee a situation, the resources you require are different. Yeah. The resources you require to kind of get that help around mental health or emotional well-being, or physical abuse that may have occurred, is very different from when you have stepped into that space, start to listen for within, to speak the truth of who you are within, or discover the truth of who you are within, that's a very different type of support that you will need. So Mary, coming back to you, and it's touching back a little bit on the question I asked before, but how did your evolution come into being, and what were the, how did your whole evolution give you that sense of healing? And are you still on your healing journey, or did you reach a point that you actually said, I am confident in who I am and who I'm being and becoming? Was there a point that you reached for that, or you can just tell us where you got to in your healing space, that you now shifted the conversation with you were having with yourself?
One of the things that I did was forgiving myself. I had put everything on me. So I started by forgiving myself and, saying that things do happen. There's nobody that is perfect in this world. So I started by analyzing myself. What did I do wrong? What went wrong? Like I would revisit the scenarios where there was a commotion or there was an argument or something negative happened, and try to see what would I do differently? If I was to be in another relationship, what is it that I can do that is so differently? So I started by having a meeting with myself, which I always say that personal time.
I love that, a meeting with myself. I love that.
So you call yourself for a meeting and say, hey, look at this is a situation. You check in with yourself.
I love it. I love that, meeting with myself.
Yeah, because even like I had sought therapy before, because mine is a very lengthy like it was I was married since 2004, so it was a long-term marriage, and I have gone through therapy before, and even the therapist would tell me things, but I was not ready. I was not hearing it. So it has to come from within. I think that's the first step. You yourself have to decide, this is what I want. Because if you don't do it, you always fall back and you'll never move forward. And then you have to forgive other people, because it goes both ways. You did something wrong, somebody else did something wrong to you. You have to learn to forgive and to let things go. Because if you just keep on holding on those things, it's like you're drinking a poison and expecting somebody else to die, and you're the one who's drinking that poison. So you have to let things go, and you have to learn to be at the moment. Life is too short. We don't know about tomorrow. I want to enjoy today. Today is the day. Let me have my fullest day today. Tomorrow is going to worry about itself.
Like Jackie.
Wow, that is so powerful. Annick, you want to jump in?
Yeah, like again, when we talk about healing, where we found, for me, all through my difficult time and challenges, work was my healing place. Work was where I gave and got back. Like I said, very often in therapy, we think, oh, I'm the therapist, but my clients, my patients, their strength, their struggle help me say, shut up. There are worse things. People are having worse things. I worked in oncology as well. And I tell you, it's an eye-opener when you put your own problem in perspective to others. So you realize that, okay, this is my bad, but there's worse. And look at how I'm able to work through these people. I am able to say, I give, I walk through with them. I have to give it to myself as well. So going to work was my healing place. I will even be sick physically and I would go to work because I felt I was contributing. And that is important for me to contribute. That's why I will never stop working.
Well, you both have hit on two very powerful points. Mary, you spoke about forgiveness, and sometimes it takes us a long time to forgive ourselves. We forgive other people, but it takes us a while to forgive ourselves. And Annick, you spoke about this element of contribution. I want you both to go a little bit deeper in terms of, let's go back to you, Annick, and then I'll come to you, Mary, around forgiveness a little bit more. but this essence of contribution, speak to that from a space of valuing self. Speak to that from a space of valuing yourself and your worth.
Okay,
What does
you
that look like?
asked for it. You're gonna get it.
But look, this is bring on the healing. I'm gonna have a meeting with myself about this later.
Listen, we have to be prepared to do some sacrifices. Okay,
Yes.
people who are whining and they're not doing sacrifices, they have to come and say, okay, what am I not doing? Again, contribution for me gives me that self-esteem. Put me, if there's one thing I am sure of, is that I've done everything that I can't write.
Mhm.
I have studied, I have worked hard, I have parented hard, I am proud of myself. I am proud of my accomplishment, but they didn't come easy. I work for it. And I know sometimes people work and they don't get what they expect out of the efforts that they are making. I got every effort. I am somebody who, I'm not a follower, but I like structure. I like routine. I like to know that this is expected of me and this is what I'm going to give and more. I work for everything that I have accomplished. My children, my marriage, my work, and my friends. I am good friends. I have friends of 47, 49 years, friends I've met at university, I'm in touch with. I'm a good aunt. I'm a good grandmother. I give, I contribute. And I'm not a religious person. And yet I help. I've helped people settle in Canada, family, and others. I have very little regret. One of the regrets that I have is that I keep grudges. I don't forgive as her. So I'm giving it back.
Well, maybe there's some learning happening here for the next meeting with yourself, but I really want to thank you because what you were just demonstrating was how you pour into yourself, how you acknowledge yourself, how you take stock.
Self-awareness is very.
And even though you call it sacrifice, what I heard was investment. Yes. I didn't hear sacrifice.
I like that. I like that, Jacqueline.
You know what I mean? I didn't hear sacrifice. And so did you make some choices? Yes. But the choices you made were right for you. And so the investment of pouring in yourself, I just really, look, I'm going to have a meeting with myself and pour into myself after this. So
you know, going back to school after 20, 30 something, like arriving at McGill, I finished in 76. I'm dating myself with my bachelor in 76.
That's wisdom.
I'm proud of my age as well, too. Okay.
There you go.
Although I splash all the cream at night.
That's taking care of yourself, my dear. That's taking care.
Yeah. And you know, I arrived at the library. My God, it wasn't the same thing at all. Finishing in 76 and going back to school in 1999 was an eye-opener. But I found out that they had a tour. They had an hour of showing you how to use the new library with the new technology. I took it. I took it. I'm always asking for help. I am, until today, I'm not very good with the computer. I ask for help. I learn what I need to learn to earn my living and to function in this society.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to come back to you about that piece in terms of asking for help, because I think sometimes that's something that holds a lot of us back in terms of where do we go for help. But I really want to come back to Mary about forgiveness. School us on forgiveness, please, in terms of, you know, because you said something also about sometimes, and correct me if I mistake your quote here, but it's like you're drinking poison and expect the other person to die. But you're the person who's dying, not only physically, but inside as well. So share a little bit about, because actually when I hear forgiveness, I hear freedom.
Yep, that's absolutely true. It's freedom. Yeah, I find that we are normally accustomed to holding on things. You are holding on. You see other people, for example, somebody could have the disorder of being a hoarder. They hoard things. Because you can see they are hoarding things, you think they're living in a filthy place. Now take that visual and put it in yourself. The more you hold on to things, you're like that hoarder that is hoarding. And that's what you're looking from the inside. So that's why you need to let go. And when you start by forgiving yourself, there's that peace that you get in you. You become very peaceful. People will do things to you, but because you already let go, it will be like a new experience. So now you're going to deal with this new experience. When you're not forgiving and letting go, when something else is done, it keeps on building. It builds. Then now we go back to that cycle. Now it turns the table around. You are being abused. Now you become the abuser because you have reached your limit and you're going to explode.
Yeah. No, definitely, it's true. It's
Wow. Thank you so much for that, because, one of the things that I heard as you were sharing that, it's almost as though what has turned, when you talk about having peace of mind, I'm hearing a new definition of power. I'm hearing a different version of power that is untouchable, unstoppable, that power that is really now around. This is even beyond agency. This is like a destiny call is what I'm hearing. What are you here? What are you hearing, Annick, in that? Because I want you to build on that by speaking about the opportunities, because you landed that thing about opportunities and asking for help. So let's build on that based on what Mary just shared in terms of that space of being peace of mind and now having
absolutely
power in a different way.
She is so right. And all my readings about forgiveness and all that, it is so true. But we don't all have the capacity, the ability to reach to that. They all true what she said. I mean, really, for anybody to deny that, as you hold on, but I do work it through in the sense with time, I eliminate those difficult situation. I've become numb to them, but that's not forgiveness either. It's just that I avoid it completely. Okay, I do a lot of self-reflection when it comes to that, but I don't have that capacity. I am developing it.
Not yet. You're developing
yes,
it.
yes. There was a question about whether women abuse men. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. And I've been in situation where I have empowered men to get custody or to get, in my clinic, women that are very, very powerful. And I don't want to use the B word, but we do know some women can be very, and studies have showed in women prison, women who are very criminal or worse criminal than men. We often thought that we also looked only at the statistics. For example, at CAS, we know that most of the sexual abuse occur by men. We never really look at the statistics for women. And once there was a study who started showing it, we saw 10% of women abuse children as well. But we never, because we thought the 90% was what we were looking at. But we see that. And I went to a grand rounds at the hospital once where they start showing you from grade 3, when girls are really in groups, and I'm not going to invite you to my birthday party. They are mean. When women are mean, women are mean. But we still have the volume of men that are more aggressive, more
the power dynamics conversation comes back in, yes. Right?
But
and thank you for presencing that. So I'm not sure if the audience member was here when you first presenced that there was also abuse that occurs from women to men as well.
Yes.
And I think and I think sometimes there's another layer of stigma to that. I mean, that notion of a man being abused by a woman, it's like their masculinity, that sense of
Yeah.
manhood is further challenged in different ways. So can you share a little bit about what some of those experiences are in terms of, from, I know there are no men on the panel per se, but again, given your practice, if
Around
there's anything you
custody.
can share about that.
A lot of it is around custody. When women make more money than men, we see that. And it's almost like a revenge. It's almost like a societal revenge. Okay, I'm in position of power now, and there are few of us, so I'm gonna make it for everybody. We know that when women are in the boardroom, they are fierce. We know that when women have the possibility of having custody for their kids, they are going to be the one that are going to push and push and push. Some men do, but some men trigger out. They rather leave it because the woman is so powerful. We have
I
women.
wonder if this is because of that notion of what we think power is, that power is dominance, power is control, distinct to what Mary was demonstrating, where power is, I've got peace of mind, I've got the sense of myself that nobody can touch. I'm wondering if this isn't a call for us to really listen for, how do we redistinguish, or how do we redefine what power really is? I once heard somebody really talk about authentic power, and authentic power was this notion of having agency, knowing yourself, not only from a space of knowing your goals, but knowing, what are those parts of myself that, what, I've got my quirks and my triggers that I will hit other people with. But it's a sense of knowing yourself at a level that nobody can come back to you with anything to
Yes,
say,
I'm important. I'm the most important person right now in my life. When I had children young, it was a different story. But right now, I am in power. I have power over me, my decision, my total being. I am priority. And that's power for me. So again, you could define power. Having money gives you power sometimes,
right.
So again, you can define power in different ways. But
Well, I think you just added another layer to it. And I want to hear Mary's story around this, in terms of, because what Annick is presencing is power as choice. How did you feel in terms of when you're able to make choices for yourself, make choices for your children? What did that bring up for you in terms of that another layer of power, of building your own authentic power and from a space of choice?
If I'm understanding this correctly, when I'm able to make my own decision, it gives me that sense of belonging, that sense that I am somebody, as opposed to when somebody makes a decision and you have to go by them, not by choice, but because you want to appease the other person. So for me, making my own decision and living by the consequences, because I always say any decision you make, there's a consequence that is going to be attached to it. And knowing that this is coming from my heart, not from somebody else's influencing me, that's what gives me power. And knowing, like for me, before you make any decision, it needs to be an informed decision, right? So you have to research about whatever decision you're making. But when it comes from me, I feel that I am somebody coming from a place where I was made to be a nobody. No matter how I rose in nursing, it didn't matter. I was always a nobody. I was not a good mother. I was not a good wife. I was not a good this. I was not a good that. So even decision making became very challenging to make. So for me now, where I am, I can make a decision. I can decide today I'm going to eat chicken, and it's chicken. It might be a small decision, but it gives me a lot of power knowing it's my own decision. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that, because some of those small decisions can build up to a bit of a wallop in terms of self. That's pouring in again, right?
Mhm.
Annick, anything for you to add to that?
No, she's definitely right. And again, there are, I think this comes with it's a developmental stage in our life that we come to a point where she was saying life is too short. We realize that at this point in time, and after losing a parent, you realize now you've lost your mother. This generation is gone. I am the next generation. My children. I think it gives you a lot of reflection about life in general, and about where am I in the standing in my trajectory. Because right now I have maybe 10 more good years left, really, before I start being, not able to even digest my little toast in the morning. So it's very important.
I see 30 more. With you looking that good, 30 more years. If you're looking that good on the outside, the
Yeah.
inside is
No,
better.
no, there are certain activities and behaviors. It comes with age as well, and it comes with experience. And a lot of my experience, like I mentioned before, a big chunk of it came from my work, the people I worked with, the people I surrounded myself with. So that piece, that's why my professional life has become so important for me, because it has shaped me. It has given me the motivation to develop that power.
Well, it's similar to what you said earlier. There isn't one place of healing. And I think
No,
one of the things that's
no.
coming up through this conversation, there isn't also only one place for me to be validated for my sense of self
Absolutely.
That's
or for the
true.
roles that I have. So some of
Absolutely.
the things that we shared at the beginning in terms of, the financial dependency, the isolation, all of these things, depending on one person to be able to validate me, provide for me, all of those things. Again, from a cultural space in a particular point in time, that may have worked. But
Yeah.
now, in this point in time, is it
Exactly.
really a feasible model
Yeah.
of how one grows and develops and becomes who they were sent here to be?
Yeah.
And that is a different conversation.
Jacqueline, another layer I want to add to this. Earlier in my career, I didn't always voice all my counseling opinion. I was more, doing the book stuff. But now in my counseling, I use my own experience, and I also use other clients' experience. And I do tell families that, you know what, I was never a single mother, so I can't tell you what it is to be a single mother, but I can tell you the resources that will make your life a little bit better as a single parent. My job is to find resources. Snowsuit fun. You could go get snowsuit for your kids as a single parent. So again, using your experience, using your voice. When I see women giving money to men, I have to really be careful, because I lose it as a professional person. I've had some clients recently, they've given money to a man they think that loves them. And it was funny. It was 1 month. Within 1 month, I had two different, and I have to be careful. I'm in the workplace. I'm doing EAP, and I had to give her some example. And, in counseling, you have to be careful not to do self-identifying. But sometimes it is helpful to get out of it and say, yes, this happened to me. It happens to my sister. It happened. She's giving over $25,000 to the guy. So I am using that power, whether sometimes it may be inappropriate a little bit, but I know most women end up poor. It's really women that retire poor or get stuck with the debt. So I have all this baggage, and I have to pass it on in my
Well,
counseling.
you're sharing some information for her to have a meeting with herself. But we have a few more minutes left, and just really want to invite our audience again to please just put your comments or questions in the chat. We have a few more minutes, about 5 more minutes left. But as you were talking, one of the things that came to my mind was, I don't remember where I heard this, but I remember someone saying that, we go through all kinds of stuff in life. moving from that survivor mode to thriving mode, to survivor to, to success and then thriving, all of those things, whatever trajectory you want to think. But what they said for me has really stuck with me, and I've been really sitting inside of this for a while. Excuse me. And it's when you go through this experience, it comes back to that choice thing again. Do I choose to be wounded, or do I choose to be in a space of wisdom? Yeah. And I think you all have shared some really beautiful wisdom nuggets this evening. And I'm just going to give the floor to you in terms of what are your final thoughts that you want to share with our audience in terms of these triggers and the journey to healing that you have experienced or witnessed in the spaces that you've had the privilege, you have been in.
For me, what I can say is I know people do suffer silently. I did for years, silently, without disclosing, even to your own family members, because you don't want to be judged. So for me, for the takeaway is I think you need to have that meeting with yourself. See what is happening around you, see what you need to change, what you need to improve, and have that open conversation with whomever. It could be your kids, it could be your brother, it could be a friend, so that at the end of it, you don't want to keep on piling on things to a point where now you turn to be the person who is causing abuse towards other people. And as I always say, forgiveness for me is key. And I know it is very difficult to forgive others, especially when you forgive and the person does the same thing over and over again. It's very difficult. It is a journey and it takes time. But just remember that the more you let go, the more you become free, and now you have power. Because I don't know if you have been in a situation where you are upset because somebody did something to you, yet the person you're upset about don't know that you're upset, and they don't understand why you're reacting the way you're reacting until you say, and they're like, oh, I didn't know I did that. You mean you got upset because I said what I said, or I did what I did? But at the end, for probably a month or so, you were carrying this burden, being upset for somebody whose life was continuing and continuing. The last thing I can say is, regardless of what is happening, we have to remember life goes on. It was morning, now it's evening. It doesn't matter what is going in your life. Tomorrow will be a new day and it will go over and over again. So you just need to pull up your socks, you have it in you, and just move forward.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mary, for those powerful closing words. Madame Constant, s'il vous plaît.
Isolation is a huge thing in our society. Even though we choose to, if someone chooses to live alone or be alone, they don't have to be isolated. Okay, isolation is a poison. And we know 25% of people in Canada live alone, but I don't know if all the 25% are isolated. It breeds mental health, abuse, and people have to try to use the resources around us. We cannot complain in 2022 that we don't have sufficient resources. We do. Sometimes we don't know about them. We need agencies, professional agencies, to guide us to where they are, but there are resources out there that could probably meet almost all your needs, or many of people's needs. Family, because we have traveled, we have left our countries of origin, we don't all are blessed to have our family around us. We have to develop families where we can find family. It doesn't have to be blood to have family. We can have good friend, long-standing friend I have friends that are in my life for 50 years, even if I don't see them, but when we connect, or I can call on them. I think we need to really look for this demon in our society of being alone and staying alone and not getting out in our community and being involved. It could be work, it could be your your church group, it could be hobby. I think people have to try to live and
Well,
be fulfilled and be fulfilled.
well, Madame Annick Constant, Mary Wariara, I hope I didn't mess up your name too much, but thank you so much for just sharing your journey and your experiences and your wisdom, and with us this evening around triggers for abusive relationships, and not only the triggers themselves for abusive relationships, but also the strength and power when we ask for help, when we seek the support, and maybe the starting point for somebody listening or some of the women that we know in our communities will be the Maama Watali support circles. And so thank you so much for sharing so much of yourselves this evening. Thank you. It's been a pleasure having a conversation with you.
Be good to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Just a reminder to our audience that, again, I want to thank our funders for which are the Ontario Trillium Foundation, the Canadian Women's Foundation, Britannia Woods Community House, and 4th Avenue Baptist Church for the projects around organizational mentors. I really want to remind our audience members to use the link and send us information about this if you want to get some information about the circles. If you're interested in being a mentor to really provide a support for women in these situations and experiences, please use the brochure on the Maama Watali Support Circles website and apply. And finally, make a note of the next webinar, which will be held on November 24th, on Thursday, November 24th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And so you'll see on the screen, it's now being shown some of the upcoming events. And so that event on the 24th will feature Simadel Cook, Mohammed Sofa, and Pastor John Weremu. And so that they're looking at how do women know when it's time to run the exit plan. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for a great conversation. Thank you for attending, and thank you funders for supporting this important initiative to provide healing space within our communities for racialized Black and other racialized women. Thank you so much.